Welcome to another episode of Champ Talk with Branden Hudson. I am your host, Branden Hudson, and we are back in action, solo podcast again. My man Chet's out, and we got a couple things going on. But before we get started, this podcast is this episode of Champ Talk, is brought to you by SBY MMA and Fitness. Come to SBY for all of your combat sports needs. If you guys get value out of this video, or you know somebody that will, please, we say it every podcast, please share it, send it to them. Please like and subscribe our channels, give us a thumbs up, give us a review on Apple, give us a review on Spotify. All that stuff helps. Check out our Facebook page, message us, ask questions. I'd love to, interact with you guys and just kind of talk it and chop it up, man. Plus, you guys can give us some good things to talk about in the upcoming weeks. So we're gonna get right into it, man. This is going to be a more of an origin story type of podcast, and few disclaimers on this. First of all, every time I talk about my story and kind of relive it or rehash it or kind of revisit it, I'm in a different place in my life, right? I'm in a different space or a different growth setting where the reflection or the perspective or all of the things that I look back on to what I used to do and how I used to do it and who I was and all those things, they change, right? So, when I say things in the past, and talk about my story, my struggles, my come up, all the above, then what happens, is fast forward 2 to 4 or 5 years of healing and of growing and of becoming a better, stronger leader and man and all that. My perspective has changed and my thoughts have changed and things that I see differently have changed. So, I wanted to share that. And I also, one of the things, man, is like, my story's not here to impress you or glamorize anything or try to highlight some sort of, shit. It's just where I'm at. And we're going to pull some nuggets out of it. But the story's got a good purpose. So I'll just get right into it. I was a fucking drug dealer. And everybody in the leadership, personal development space who talks on stage, gets on podcasts and all that, they want to talk about that shit. They like to glamorize that shit or use that shit as some cool points. I've seen a couple speakers that, just wanted to talk about their prison time and all that stuff. And that shit just that don't sit with me. Some people are really, inspired and some people are in ooh gaga and stuff like that. To me, that's not what I really want to be known or remembered as. And, when I say that, I was selling marijuana. I sold marijuana since I was in like 9th grade. And, obviously I'll be 44 this year. So this is a different time before marijuana, when marijuana was demonized and things like that. And it was just kind of what I knew, right? I started off smoking it, started off selling it. You know what I mean? Everything was cool in high school. Bumped into a couple older guys, some older plugs. Then it just kind of got out of hand. You know what I mean? And really turned into something I didn't expect. And again, I'm not glamorizing this shit. And I'm not telling you guys this to impress you. I'm just saying it's all gonna tie together in the end. And once I got, and mind you, we came from very humble beginnings. We came from, my mom and dad worked their ass off while they were raising us 4 boys. I'm the oldest grandson, oldest son. So there was nobody, above me that I could look up to. I had, I fell in love with the streets. I fell in love with the hooligans and the guys that, were running those sectors. And, it was a combination of things that just kind of led into it. And I also had this other side of me where I wasn't the dropout. I went to, high school and I, hung out with the preppy kids, hung out with the rednecks, hung out with the block, I had friends all over. And as I got out of high school and started moving on, it started becoming more and more serious, and eventually, I'm in a room where we're breaking down anywhere from, 500 to 750 pounds every 2 to 3 weeks, right? That's not normal selling weed and being your party guy, and again, this was a long time ago. Hopefully the statute of limitations have expired. It's one of those things where as I got into it, I just didn't really, there's a lot of things. There's a lot of layers. One, you fall in love with the power. You fall in love with the freedom and the ability. You come up as a poor kid and all of a sudden you can go sell some weed that everybody, loves and wants to be a part of and so on and so forth. Next thing you know, you're, in the mix of things and thinking it's okay and accepting it. But as a drug dealer, what happens is you get in love with the power, you get in love with the freedom, you get in love with the ability to hustle, to grind, all of that. And then, you start developing entitlement issues. You start developing, all these things that kind of push you into thinking that it's acceptable and thinking that you should you should be the one making the great sacrifice for everybody. You know what I mean? I got to make the great sacrifices, go out here and risk my life and risk my freedom so that my family and my friends and all of us can eat and all of us can do this. And it just, it gets really out of hand, but there's nobody there telling you like these little ins and outs. And I'm hoping one of the things that some of the listeners will hear from this podcast episode is some sort of magical combination of words that are going to unlock something in your mind to say you don't have to do that, right? Whether you're selling weed, whether you're selling fucking pills or whatever you're into, you know what I mean? I do not condone, drug dealing. I'm also not one of these motherfuckers that sit here and lived a certain life and all of a sudden I changed my life and I'm like, condemn everybody and, try to act like I'm something I'm not. I know where I came from. I know who I am. And it's just, I don't think that route is something that's going to take you into where you want to go. I'm one of the very few very lucky people that get out without having to do long stretches of prison time, without having to, lose or get shot or anything like that. And it just, there's not very many success stories in it. And most people, why I'm so against telling this story so much is because, the success story in it is what people hang on to, and they think like, well, he did it, I can do it. Well, if you look at the numbers, it's very lopsided. It's not very common that people get out of that shit. And then even if they get in trouble or do have an opportunity to change their life, they don't change. They go back and revert back to what they're used to. And I'm going to get into all that, but it was one of them things where I did it for 18 years, and I was really good at it. I was in neighborhoods that people my skin color shouldn't be in, so to speak. At least that's what the people in the neighborhoods and the police told me all the time. I was doing things that, I was in that gangster life, man. And I still had this human side of me, right? I wasn't like this full blown block hugging thug that was, shooting people and, well, yeah, you know what I mean? And all that. But you got to play by the rules when you're in that world, right? And whoever said that that drug dealing's easy, they don't understand the mechanics of the underworld. It's not easy. It's a very difficult. It's fast, and as fast as the money comes in, the money goes out faster. And I've done crazy shit, man. I've had $20,000-$30,000 weekends in Vegas and Miami, and $5,000-$6,000 shopping sprees and homes, cars, all this crazy shit throughout the course of as my adult life came around. And it was just kind of out of hand, man. I carried guns. It was all of the things that you could think of. And what's crazy, when people think of where I'm from here in Salisbury, Maryland, we don't think of it like that it's so crazy. And there's just, it's, every town's got a bad neighborhood. Every town's got these issues, unfortunately. You know what I mean? And I just happen to be into that, into that world. And I've been home for almost 10 years. I ended up finally getting locked up, and I did a small sentence. I got a year. I got caught with a smaller amount of weed at the time. And I got my distribution charge, my felony, and I sat back and I did some time. And, I did, unfortunately, 8 months on that year in county time because you just don't learn your lesson when you get in there. You're still, as a drug dealer or a former drug dealer or conditioned as a drug dealer, you're so entitled and think you know so much. Criminals are the smartest motherfuckers in the world, let me tell you. They swear they know everything, you know what I mean? But at the end of the day, most of us were and are locked up and caged, so we don't know too much. But where am I going with all this, right? This all came and enlightened me from a conversation I was having with my cousin the other day, and we were talking about him pushing his son into really taking wrestling serious and taking training more serious, especially for his senior year. You know what I mean? Because he's very talented and very, very solid, but he's just like any other teenager. He's working and making money. He's got a girlfriend. He's not everybody wants to get up and go all the time. You have to be a figure and a coach, and you have to push these young adolescents. And what was so interesting to me when I was telling him we were talking about that, he had brought up a point about how, the ventures that he's in, and had he stopped or not, or had he not continued to push, he does these events for the community and stuff like that. And, you know, he could have stopped at the first, second, or third event and, you know, cashed out and said, hey, look, that was the event. But instead he decided he wanted more. My cousin did. And he decided he wanted to push farther and go harder and make it bigger than what it's ever been. And he accomplished that, right? And he was telling that story to his son. He was like, look, man, you know, when it comes down to hard work, you can either, you know, step up and go all in, or you can, you know, accept good enough and that'll be it. And you'll be remembered as the guy that was good enough, not the guy that was exceptional and the person that was extraordinary. And I had to remind my cousin about this, right? I had to remind my cousin, because this is something, and this is where the story ties in, is that I remember when my cousin was younger, right? His grandfather and his mother, and when his father was around, his father would push him to work. They would make him do stuff around the house. You know, his grandfather was very well off, did very well for himself, very successful man, but he still was hands-on and still worked. And he pushed my cousin into working, into pushing himself, you know what I mean? Shutting off the weekend activities, or having to get this job done first before you can go to, you know, to town or whatever. And my cousin kind of forgot all of that. And what that did for my cousin is, a very young age, similar to what he's doing for his son, my nephew, is he's pushing him to create and install a very solid, great work ethic at a very young age. You know, where that wasn't really a big value at my house, right? In my house, you know what I mean? Like, my mom and dad just carried the load, you know what I mean? They did it all. And, you know, my mom and dad would be like, you know, they didn't really have the patience or maybe the focus to stand over us boys and make us do all of our chores and make us go out here and get jobs and make us do stuff. They provided everything we needed, you know, and it just, that wasn't a very strong core value in our household. Although, contradictorily, they worked their fucking asses off and, you know, didn't stop working and still work to this day. So at the end of the day, it was something I was trying to explain to him, like how important it is that he is doing what he's doing by pushing my nephew to go to these different wrestling camps and get in the weight room on the off season and doing all the things that high performance sports athletes and so forth do. And that led me to think about myself. As I told my cousin that and rang some bells, that led me to think about myself. And it was a huge aha moment. You know, I don't like to promote or talk about, you know, how my hustling days or anything, because I don't want to be remembered as that. So I've spent the last 10 years trying to break 20 years of a bad habit, 20 years of something that I was very comfortable and used to doing. You know, when you can't walk away from that kind of money, because it's not like no gangs or cartels had the gun to my head, you know what I mean? You know, I was really good at what I did, and I understood how to maneuver in the underworld. And, you know, at the end of the day, I made a fuck ton of money. What I did with it was foolish. I spent it faster than it went in. And when I, you know, ended up being done, I ended up being in the red. But, you know, at the end of the day, what I realized was that was my entrepreneur's journey beginning. You know, when I say that hard work, pushing us kids in my household with hard work wasn't a core value, I was still, you know, where I was the oldest, I still would go to work with my uncles, man, and my uncles would work the shit out of me, and they would really teach me how to push. My dad took me to a couple jobs laying masonry work and make some money, and I really, you know, worked hard, and I had a good work ethic, and a lot of it really came from playing football for Y High, you know, under one of my coaches, man, Coach Dave Nettles. He was one of my favorite people in the world, you know what I mean? And he taught me how to be really strong and have a strong work ethic and not, you know, not break or bend, along with my uncles and so forth. So I had the grind in me. I had the grit in me. But once I got into that life, you know what I mean? You know, you just get real lazy and or at least that's most of us. We got real lazy and entitled and just, we'd spend the money. I remember one time my fucking toilet was messed up and I paid a plumber $250 to come out and literally change the chain that goes from the flusher to the plunger. That's how lazy, you know, or entitled I was at that time, right? It baffles my mind that I did that and didn't think anything of it. What was $250? You know, okay, cool, no problem. You know, so anyway, fast forward, so they started making me remember that when we were really knee deep in the streets and really at our peak, I was basically an entrepreneur at that point. I understood, money coming in, money coming out. I understood paying back loans, so to speak. I understood, personnel management, because you got people underneath of you, and you got people that are, you're counting on to make their quotas and stuff like that, deadlines, strategizing, like all of it. You know what I mean? And then learning human psychology and learning people. And again, I'm going to say this again. I'm by no means am I trying to promote, advocate, or condone any illegal activity, especially that drug dealing, because I did not win from that. Okay. This was my experience. This was what I went through. I did not win in the grand scheme of that. I was very lucky to get out of it, but with everything that I was involved in and how much money I had went through my hands, I should have had way more and done way more things than what I'm doing today. So I'm not condoning that by no means. But I can't change what happened, and I can't change what I went through, and I can't change my perspective of what that's done. And what that entrepreneurial spirit back then did for me was that pushed me to be, when I came home from jail and I, had all that backup time over my head, and I was a convicted felon. I didn't have any real true skills. Like I didn't have like a, what you call, like a craftsmanship or a trade. I didn't have any of that in my belt. I had to get the gab, could talk my way into, wherever. But at the same time, as a lot of people that listen to this that are in high performing sales, you really, until you really take that to the next step, you really don't have your own business when you're in sales. You're in sales. You're making someone else money. And there's nothing wrong with that. For me, I just didn't want to be limited to these constraints. I wanted to get into business for myself. And, just like a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners, I thought for sure that if I got this many people times this much a month minus this, I was going to just make thousands of dollars, millions of dollars, and so forth. And, obviously when you get into business, if anybody knows this, it's farthest from the truth. It's very hard. It's very difficult. But what I learned in the game really transmuted over into what I'm done in the entrepreneur spirit. But I had forgotten about this because, and this is some nuggets that you can, you should take notes on if you're struggling to get out of something. I had to rewire my thinking and the way that I operated. See, I knew how to make a lot of money and I knew how to pay my bills. I had no clue how to budget. I had no clue how to rob Peter to pay Paul when things came up short, because I could just go out here and hustle, right? So, and I bought whatever I wanted when I wanted it, and I just did whatever I wanted to do when I wanted to do it. So that created really, really bad habits for me to not know how to do what most people know how to do, that, get a paycheck, or most business owners that go out here and they have to, they have checks and balances. So for the past 10 years, I've spent so much time rewiring my thing. And I'm talking about, dude, I remember I had bought a bunch of Jordans just because my boys were buying them, right? And this was 15, 20 years ago, right? So this wasn't like the new age stuff where, I think you get so many off the internet and things like that. Like you had to go and wait in line at the store, wait for the drops and stuff like that back in the day. A lot of my sneakerheads and my old heads know about that. And I didn't even really know what Jordans really were. The only ones that I got them on my feet right now, were the ones, right? The ones are the ones that, I like. And that was because they're just like Air Force Ones, right? And that's really all I wore was Air Force Ones and things like that. I was heavy into hip hop. And I had 15, 16 grand at the time worth of Jordans on my wall in boxes I never even wore, right? I helped when I was in trouble. My cousin and I actually started his business with him called, this business called Dead Stock. It's a shoe store. I'll give you a shameless plug. If you guys looking for any kind of, shoes, holler at him. He's online. Dead Stock, SPY, Dead Stock OC, Ocean City, Maryland. But anyway, so we started a consignment shoe store, and we used my inventory to start it. And, it did really well. And then, that wasn't really for me. So, and, we didn't see eye to eye, my cousin. We moved on and that's his thing. He does a great job. But my point is I had to even go as far for me when I was rewiring my thinking. I didn't even want nothing to do with Jordans. I didn't want nothing to do with shoes. I didn't want nothing to do with anything that remotely reminded me or remotely pushed me into the way of selling drugs, right? I remember one time me and my she was my girlfriend then, my wife now, we were literally watching a movie. We were watching Wolf of Wall Street. And literally some of the things that they were doing, my hands actually got sweaty, and I was actually starting to get like these body feelings and body experiences where I was like, like getting super excited and super like pumped up because of that kind of fast money and the way they were partying and the way they were living and all that stuff. I was like, cool. You know what I mean? I'm like finding myself getting really ramped up in a lot of ways. And I was like, I can't even watch these kind of movies. I can't watch these hustler kind of movies or these drug dealing kind of movies or fast cash or illegals or whatever, because that's bringing back some feelings and some thoughts. And I've never had that feeling before. I've never gotten like that body response before. One of the other things I didn't do, my birthday's on 4/20. No bullshit. The weed man's birthday's on 4/20. How about that? Along with Hitler and Columbine's anniversary and all these, horrible other things. You know what I mean? My birthday's on 4/20. And I loved marijuana. I smoked it so much. I smoked good shit. I love blunts. I love rolling up a blunt, getting high, doing all that shit. That was my thing, right? And then I vowed, and I wasn't going to smoke weed when I came home. You know what I mean? And that just was something that I knew that I had to not do, because even though I'm pro marijuana for anything, medicinal, and if you need it, it's way better than narcotics and painkillers. There's so many great benefits of it. I don't think kids and young adults under the age of 23, 22 should be smoking it. I don't think anybody should be smoking it, honestly, but I don't think kids should be using it because they've done research on the development, and I don't think you should abuse it. You know what I mean? And you can abuse anything. But it wasn't the fact that I was addicted to weed. I'm not addicted to drugs, never have a drug problem. I had a drug dealing problem. So I knew that if I started smoking, even if I was done with the game, I knew that if I was to continue to go back and forth to the weed man's house or whoever, eventually one of my peoples was going to be like, hey man, can you get me a free bag? And I would have justified getting them a free bag to get mine cheaper. And all of a sudden I'd have been back flipping packs, riding around with a chopper in the streets, right? Like I knew who I was. So I had to find these triggers or these things that I knew that would put me in a vulnerable or weaker situation and stay away from them. And shoes, I'm not anti tennis shoes. It's just that a whole lifestyle in a whole, whatever represented that lifestyle. The music, hip hop, you know what I mean? The music I was growing up on, the hip hop I was growing up on, we had that late 90s, early 2000s, we had, the Locks, DMX, Jay-Z, Nas, Jeezy. We had great era of hip hop, and a lot of it in the early days was talking about, getting out of the struggle. And then, you kind of saw how hip hop kind of translated in a lot of the record A&Rs got a hold of a lot of these rappers and told them to talk about stuff they weren't really doing and glamorizing shit. I had to stop really listening to hip hop as much as I used to. And I just had to really reprogram myself and stay away from anything that was remotely close to what potentially could get me thinking and feeling and acting like I was back in the streets. Because I understood I needed to make a change. I understood I needed to rewire my thinking and rewire the way that I looked at it. And then when I would talk about my story, I would utilize that in the beginning when I became a personal trainer and I was, competing and fighting and in the cage and started my own business and did all those. I would utilize that as to make a point of, you can go from a negative to a positive, and there's always another side of the story, and bop, 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 but as I grew and as I developed and as I became, more successful and more of a leader, then, I worked hard to fade away from that story. You know what I mean? I worked hard to not let that story define me. I want to be known, and I'm working to be known of creating other leaders and building and growing and being successful and understanding how to do, business and life and relationships and faith and all these things that, I focus really hard on to help me out, and so that's what I'm really more focused and geared towards. So it's almost like I kind of suppressed that lifestyle or that even image or thought. I knew it was always there, and you'd hear me talk about it here and there. But at the end of the day, I don't want that to be my defining moment, right? I know that that's a part of my story. It's a chapter of my story, but that should be my defining moment. And that's why I said in the beginning, it really gets on my nerves. A lot of these, these entrepreneurs and these guys that want to get on stages and talk and get on the internet, and get on their soapbox and kind of say, I was a drug dealer, and they want to. They think that they're getting points for that, and there might be a handful of people that are impressed with that, or inspired by that, and there's nothing wrong with that, or they could connect with whatever works. But for me, I just think it's, if you're really from that life, then you know that ain't something you want points for or something that you want to be glamorized for, right? Um, I remember in jail, dude. We're in a local jail. It's right in the city I live in. Our city's about 42,000 population. Our county's about 200,000. You know what I mean? So we're on the eastern shore of Maryland, right? We're Delmarva Peninsula, Delaware, Maryland, and Virginia, eastern shore peninsula, right? And it's not like a huge metropolitan. It's one of these places that a little bit slower, a little bit behind, but we're a city. We got things going on. So like you're in the local county jail, and that's why gosh, and county time was so tough, man. They say prison time was way better because you can move around, but I'll tell you what, county time was harsh. You sat in a fucking room for all day long, and that's what you did, and that was miserable. But anyway, my point is when I got there, you know what I mean? Like your name travels fast around the jail, and a couple people, a lot of people never young, unfortunately, and I was in my mid 30s, and what happened was what they did was a couple people knew me, and they either knew me from the streets, they knew me from fighting in the cage and competing in MMA, or they knew me, with the shoe store, right? The younger ones knew me in the shoe store, and everyone else knew me from something else. So my name got around, and man, they were treating me like John Gotti in there, man. I had no problems in there. You know what I mean? There was another dude in there that was a pretty serious and respected guy in there. Me and him hit it off, well. Man, they were treating me like I was I remember one dude wanted to fight with supposed to be your thug. He wanted to fight my cell buddy, and I was cool with my cell buddy from back home. And he come to me like, yo, is it cool that, you know what I mean? We squat. I'm like, dude, I don't want nothing to do with this. Because the day I went into jail, I decided I was going to work on me and get back to square one. And there was a whole journey amongst that and issues with that. But that was what my commitment was. So I wasn't there for all that shit. But the point I'm trying to make is it would have been real easy for me to bait into and follow into the fact that, I was respected because what I did on the streets, and I was respected, and I was this, and I was that, and I got that. That'd have been real easy for me to follow that narrative. But then, would that really have helped me change? Would that really have helped me evolve and walk away from the game and say I'm done and I'm good? I don't think it would have, personally. I think that would have just fed my ego even more and made me think that I was bigger than what I am, and continued my trajectory of self-destruction. So those were like examples, you know what I mean, that I used to break away from that mold, right? Those were examples that I had to say, look, on this journey, I'm going to define myself into what my reaction to what happened and what my actions are moving forward, not glamorize something that I was and live back in my, my glory days or my high school peaking days. You know what I mean? Like that shit's corny to me. Also didn't want to be fucking 35, 40 years old competing in the streets again when I came home. Like I was, that was like something that was corny as well. That's just not my thing. I had, nothing but love for these guys, but I just saw a post from one of the police, agencies around here about like 40 some people getting locked up, and majority of them are my age. And I'm like, geez, man, in drugs and selling, and I'm like, fuck, dude, that's rough. That's rough, man. That any jail's time is horrible, but let alone when you're older, it just gets even worse, So that's just not what my thing is. It's not where I'm at. And not, it's not what I wanted to do. And I knew that if I didn't reprogram or rewire my thinking and get away from the triggers, you know what I mean? Just like if I was an addict on, drugs or an alcoholic, then I would be right back into the game. And I'm not going to lie, there was many times, coming up, man, when I came home, dude, I came home a convicted felon. I had 3 kids that were in the household. I didn't get nothing taken from me, right? So I had about, $7,000 to $8,000 worth of overhead expenses for my household, my house, things like that. I was in 15 grand worth of debt. All I had was like a guy tell me that a gym would give me a chance. I didn't even have a personal training license at that point. Certification. I was a losing fighter. My record was 2-4-1 in the cage. I had fought for a title, but I had lost that in a decision. I mean, it was one of those things where like there was no accolades and no way for me to stand out. I had no skill, no trade, and I just started selling more jewelry, selling more fucking shoes, and just really trying to figure out how to make some money and get myself out of the hole and by the grace of God and hard work and determination, I was able to do that. And thank God. And I'm very blessed to do so. You know, my wife was a big part of the help there. My friends were big in impacting that. And that was what was needed for me to learn. And during that few years, I was learning how to rob Peter to pay Paul, learning how to budget. I remember one of the most important things I ever did was download an app, a free app that I could put every single thing, and I still use it to this day, every single dollar in and dollar out that I make, pay. See, if I find $5 on the fucking ground, I'll put that as $5 income on as far as miscellaneous money. Because that right there, when you see what you track, what doesn't get measured, doesn't get improved, when you see your money and where it's going, you're like, oh shit, I'm spending way too much money on this and way too much money on that. And I'm very diligent and anal about that stuff. So it was easy for me to stay on top of it. But that was another big thing in those early years of what it took for me to push myself and get smarter and get away from that lifestyle. You know what I mean? And in the early years, we talked about positivity. And I think in personal development, I think that's like the first stage of personal development is like thinking more positive and looking at the positive side. And, you know, a negative can't exist without a positive. One cannot exist with the other. Light can't exist without darkness. So there's always the other side of everything. And obviously I'm hoping that you're thinking of the positive sides instead of the negative. So like that was my message to a lot of my clients. And that was my message to myself. And I was really saying that to remind me that I was on the right journey and the right track. And I was doing what I was supposed to be doing. And dude, I mean, it was 50, 60, 70, 80 hours a week sometimes that, you know, I had to do and I had to push, and I still do. You know what I mean? I'm building an empire. I'm building a legacy. You know, there's when you're an entrepreneur, you can be an entrepreneur to sit there and make the check and do your thing, or you could be an entrepreneur to live in your purpose and leave a legacy. And that was, you know, that's where I'm at now. And in doing so, that's where you kind of learn so much. That's where you learn the meat and potatoes. That's where you get sharper, you get smarter and things like that. And it's been a great ride. You know, I'm very lucky that every single person who's listening to this or watching this does. I don't care if I got 5 followers or 5 million followers. To me, it's so crazy and so fortunate that I have one person that's willing to listen to me. And of all the things you could scroll on, or all the things you could play, or all the things that you could consume yourself with, you're taking the time to listen to me. And I think that's just amazing. I think that's crazy. I think it's amazing. I think it's awesome. I'm very grateful. I'm gracious in that. And that's more, you don't even understand the gratefulness and the gratitude I have in my heart for that. But yeah, you got to rewire. I strongly suggest rewiring whatever you're trying to change, you're trying to break, or mold you're trying to fix, because it's so hard to say no to something you're so used to, you know, or something that's comfortable, or something that you've known for so long. So that was a big deal for me. Another point I want to hit on, and I wanted to mention on this was, you know, so I've always been kind of like, I've always been like a popular guy, right? Like in school, I was popular. You know what I mean? And this isn't a fucking cool me story. I got to point to this. You know, I was a homecoming king in high school. I always had a good group of friends. I was always the leader. One of the things I realized when I was selling drugs was that when I stopped, like 4, 5, 6 of my friends stopped selling drugs and started their own businesses. I was like, geez, what kind of a fucking example was I setting for them? You know, and you know, what influence was I pushing them to? So I've always been like this popular guy. I got into this, you know, mixed martial arts and started competing. I've won 2 championships. That really made me popular and known here. Being in a smaller area, in a small town, and just putting a lot of content out there. I've always been somebody that people have known, liked, and trusted, wanted to, you know, hang out with, party with, be around, and things like that, right? So I guess what I'm trying to say is, and now I'm a coach, and now, you know, I'm a business owner, and I coach real estate agents over with, you know, the Maryland and Delaware group of EXP. I recruit, I coach, I mentor, I coach fighters, kids, all the above here. I've had, you know, clients, all the things, right? All the things. I've done speaking. So I'm not somebody that's not a leader, right? One of the interesting things for me that happened about 3, maybe 4 years ago is I finally announced that out loud. I finally accepted and said out loud that I'm a leader. Leading up to that point about 4 years ago, I never even said those words. It was just not something that thought about or did, or even worse, something I even considered myself. You know what I mean? I didn't really even consider myself a leader. And that's crazy if you think about like what I just told you and all the people that I've impacted and all the people I've been in front of. But when I decided and when I chose to own the fact that I was a leader, and now I've even taken it even farther, I'm a leader amongst leaders. When I decided to own that title and own that role, it's almost like everything changed. It's almost like just the blinders were taken off my eyes, and I've realized, fuck, I've got a responsibility and a duty to the people that I care about, the people that are relying on me, to my employees, to the people that are, you know, looking to me for success, looking to me for, you know, to get better in combat sports, compete, whatever, whoever, you motherfuckers out here. I mean, I've got a duty now. And it helped me really fall into my purpose and fall into what's really important for me. And when I first started my business, and then like in the halfway point, and as I started seeing success and I started seeing opportunities, and into the point around that, right around when I said that I was a leader and I own that. You know, as you get older, the hearts of men change and things change for me. And my purpose now and my mission now is I'm big on legacy. I'm big on legacy. For me, legacy is more important than anything else. And, you know, I think I heard Mike Tyson be asked about that. And he's like, you know, what the fuck is legacy? I ain't gonna be here anyway. Well, that's cool for Mike. But for me, you know what I mean? It's important for me. And everybody can have their own thing. Nobody's wrong here. Two things can be right at the same time. But for me, when I say I want to leave a legacy behind, I don't want a fucking street sign named after me or a monument or a statue, right? That'd be cool. I'd be gracious, you know, name one of the halls down at the hospital or, you know, at the college. That'd be awesome. I want a legacy for my family. I want a legacy for my kids. You see, with my story and the things that I've been through and went through, I've realized that I just have a different opportunity and a different mindset than a lot of others. And there's usually everybody, I heard Ed Milet talk about this, and I agree with him so much. There's usually one person in every successful family that is the one. They're that one person that decides that they're going to do something different. They're going to go harder than anybody else did, and they change the dynamic and the trajectory of their family forever. And I love when Ed talks about that. He's one of my heroes, man. I think the world of him. And for me, you know what I mean? I know that I'm the one. You know, I know that I'm the one that can change the trajectory for my family forever. And it doesn't mean I'm going to save my family. It doesn't mean I'm going to be the, you know, knight in shining armor. They'll still have to do the work. You know, a lot of people are mixed up and think that you're going to be able to save your family. Well, some people don't want to be saved. I'm just going to have the ability to give opportunity and to give a plethora of knowledge to my kids and my family and my family's family, my kids' kids, and my kids' kids' kids, and my kids' kids' kids. And they say that, you know, extreme wealth is fucked up 4 generations later, right? So, you know, my mission and my legacy is to make sure that 4 generations later, that my kids are still out here doing their thing and creating legacies for themselves. What I think would be the most impactful move that I could ever do, and you don't see this anymore. You don't see this at all anymore. Nobody does this. Nobody. Remember back in the day before the internet, people used to tell stories. They used to tell stories about their grandfather or their family, and they talked about their family lineage, and they talked about the you know, stories and the crazy upbringings and the crazy, you know, things that they heard, and the good, the bad, and the ugly. And kids, I mean, I was very impactful on this. Kids would just be idolized about this and would be all in, and it would be just awesome to be able to hear these stories and live up to the man that you heard or the woman that you heard and the matriarch, the patriarch of the family. And we don't do that anymore, right? We live so fast, and sometimes those values aren't installed as they used to be into the next generations. But for me, I got a digital library. I got a catalog of video, of pictures, of written posts. Who knows, I'll have a book and maybe a show and all these things. I've got so much for my kids to be able to go back and learn from their daddy's daddy or whoever that is. So much for my family to learn of what that I've got to do, that they learn how I was the one that broke the chains. I was the one that broke the mold. I was the one that went here and did the sacrifice and put on and leave a legacy. And I think that the biggest the biggest accomplishment of my life is to do such a great job at being a father, being a husband, being a family member, a role model, a leader, a business owner, a coach, all the things you want to tie me into, a champion. I think the biggest accomplishment I could ever be is to be able to have my picture in my great grandkids' living room or in their house. You know, think about that. You used to have that. We used to have family members that used to have a picture of their family members still in that house. And with all of the technology and the social medias and the YouTubes and the channels and things like that, you know, I have an opportunity for them to go revert back and hear it from the horse's mouth. But if I could get a picture in one of those of myself, I think that's the biggest example of leaving a legacy. And I didn't think about that until, you know, this year. And I didn't think about the things that I thought about until, you know, I owned that I was a leader. And I couldn't get to the fact that I was a leader until I went through the struggles of being an entrepreneur and learning how to rob Peter and pay Paul and all that stuff. And I didn't get to that point unless I got in trouble for selling drugs. And I didn't get to that point unless I went through the trenches. So all these things have a butterfly effect and have a linear effect on where you are today and where I'm at today, right? And I think in closing, what is the most important part about all this is I just never stopped and settled for what was in front of me, right? And I'm not saying I'm perfect, and I've made a ton of mistakes, and I continue to make mistakes. You know, whenever you guys decide to cancel me, you know what I mean? That'll be another mistake I make because I say some fucking wild shit, but, you know, I don't give a fuck, right? At the end of the day, you know, I never let this shit stop me. I never let it define me. I always pushed to be better than I was yesterday. And I always gave to the people and loved the people. And then as I did the work and I showed up and I owned the fact that I was a leader and I owned the fact that I was in the space that I was supposed to be and all these things that I've shared with you today, that helped me realize and that revealed to me what it is that God wants me to do and what it is that, you know, my purpose is in life. And I don't think you need to know that at 20 years old or need to know that at 30 years old. If you know your purpose at that age, that's wonderful. That's magnificent. Some people do. But if you don't, that's okay too. As long as you're moving in a direction, and long as you are, even if you're in a bad situation, even if you're in a world of darkness and pain, you have the ability to just keep pushing forward and keep bettering your best. And again, if you allow yourself to continue to stay the condition with the things that you really don't want to be in, then you really do want to continue to stay there. You're lying. You're bullshitting. You really do want to stay where you're at. But if you always strive to do a little bit better and then make those tough decisions and make those tough calls and stand alone and walk a path that nobody else will walk, then you'll have the ability to see things that no one else gets to see. You'll have the ability to be able to have your life and your purpose revealed to you. And I'm telling you this, man, when I work 85, 90 hours a week, still to this day, it's so much easier knowing that I'm doing it for my purpose than just going out here and doing it for some other reasons. It's so much easier for me to swallow and understand that because I'm out here doing these things for what I need and want to do in my life, these hours don't matter. These hours are deposits. These hours are adding to what's coming up in the future and what I have to bring to the table and this legacy that I'm striving and working so diligently and so hard on leaving. So I hope you guys get some value from this. You know what I mean? I really hope I don't sound like a fucking douchebag and somebody that's, you know, all about himself. That's not my intention here. I just want to inspire you and I just want to give you something and let you know that you fucking matter. Your life matters. Your decision matters. You're a human. You're a human on this earth, having a human experience, and you know, don't just do the best that you can or the best that you know how to. Always strive to be better and strive to do better than what you can, and reach out. You know what I mean? Reach out. You know, I'm here. I'm here to help. I'm here to pour back into my community, pour back into this world. But I just hope that you get something from this, and I hope that you are able to take some of the things that I shared with you. That's my story, and apply it to yours so that you have the ability to break the chains that you want to break free from, or, you know, break the molds or be the one like, you know, we talked about of just changing the dynamic and being that leader. So I love you guys. You know, thank you so much for everybody that listens. Thank you so much for hearing my story and continue to tune in. Again, if you've gotten value out of this, man, please share this, send it to somebody. Rate me a review, you know what I mean? Help us get seen more on Spotify. Help us get seen more on Apple. Help us get seen more on YouTube. Subscribe to our channels, do all that good stuff, because that's what helps us get out there. And until next time, guys, what are you doing today to become a champion?